Coming up this week on the Markcast. Well, here we are post XFL 2023 season. The XFL just held its rookie draft. They're signing undrafted free agents in the offseason, trying to scoop up all of the unsigned talent they can before the USFL completes its season. In the words of a semi-famous punk band from the Chicago suburbs, this ain't a scene, it's a arms race. Exciting show this week. Your friend and mine, Ric Serritella, coming back on the program. Big news from Ric in his own football career here, but also we are grading and analyzing the XFL team picks here in the offseason. Ric has grades for all of the teams' rookie drafts as well as the undrafted free agents they've signed, and we are spotlighting players you should keep an eye out for heading into XFL next year.
Well, I think it's an arms race, right? Whose pockets are deep enough to last for the long haul? And as much as I want to see both leagues be sustainable and survive, I don't know if that's going to be the case, Reed, and hopefully it's not the case. But I think that the XFL is really not paying attention to what the USFL is going to do. They're going to go about their business. And I do believe XFL has secured the greater level of talent. And so therefore, I believe that the demand or the desire for the street free agent, at least, their preference is going to remain the XFL. At least that's my understanding from the community and individuals I've spoken to.
And then don't change the dial. You are here on the correct YouTube channel here, the, somewhat known as the USFL Hating Podcast. We are back. Pat Rifino off of our Monday and Tuesday USFL recaps here on the main show this week. We are doing our official, the Markcast, All-USFL 2023 team awards, handing them out. Pat has done a ton of homework you don't want to miss.
At that point, I feel like it's more of a fan bias than an actual analytical perspective of Boogie didn't make it or this guy did make it. And it's they all played really well throughout the whole year. And at some point, the line of demarcation gets I put Boogie as my defensive tackle.
And then we are barreling through the CFL season already on week 3. The BC Lions will have, hopefully, America's team here, hopefully have beaten the Winnipeg Blue Bombers here at Thursday night before you're listening to this. But a big slate of games this weekend. We're bringing back Derek Taylor, the voice of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, to talk through everything CFL week 3. How bad are the Elks, I guess, right now?
Right now, really bad. Apart from the Geno Lewis 102-yard reception in week 1, what do they have? 200 yards passing at 50% rates. And the run game, which I think a lot of us thought was going to be really good because Kevin Brown looks like he can really hammer dudes and run that ball, hasn't picked up the slack.
Should be a good one. Hope you enjoy. Hey guys, welcome to the Markcast. Reed here, recording things a little out of order this week. A busy work week for me, so hopefully this all comes out correctly here. Busy week here. We've had the undrafted signings here with the XFL posting all that coming off the rookie draft last week. I know John Bogle, Evan Wilsmore, Coach Craig Sports, we all kind of did the live breaking analysis of all of that as the draft picks came down last Friday. If you missed that, that was a good time. We have about an hour or so kind of knee-jerk reaction on that. But I was talking with Ric Serritella. He said, I want to come back. I want to do a full breakdown. I got grades and everything for all the teams, how the DPPs and everyone, the coaches, what Ric thought of all of that. And also just really cool, kind of backstory tidbits on a lot of the players Ric has been tracking here. So something, it's not like the sexiest thing in the world here with the these players and do we know them? Does the casual viewer, all of that? I think Ric does a good job kind of fleshing that out. But kind of the conundrum right now is XFL signing all this talent, USFL, and they did their, the college draft and all of that. How is that all going to pan out in the arms race for the talent? I hope that was a good reference this week. The Fall Out Boy song came out in 2007, if you want to feel old about that here in the year 2023. But it was going back and forth with Smog from the desolation of the Hobbit movies, whatever, hoarding the treasure, and decided to go with the arms race of the Fall Out Boy. So I hope you enjoy that. Rick also has some news to break today, some announcements from Ric Serritella here coming up in his role with the IFA, the International Football Alliance. Really excited and honored that Rick would take the time and feel the desire to come on our show to share some of that, hoping that we can be helpful to them and everything in their endeavors coming down in the future. So really appreciate Rick taking the time to come on to share that news. Like I said, then Pat Rifino coming back. Pat and I do our weekly live recaps following the USFL games over the weekend, but Pat is back. He said, I want to do I have Pat write articles for the website throughout the year. And Pat said, I want to do an All-USFL team awards. So we did that. Pat came on, really exciting. Like I said, I talk with Pat every week, but like getting him on the main episode. So I hope you enjoy. And then, like I said, Derek Taylor, voice of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who is either going to be happy or sad today with the BC Lions, hopefully having beaten them at home. That's quite the conundrum there. BC traveling to Winnipeg to do that, but hopefully they win that. Lots of CFL stuff to talk about. I love catching up with Derek. We've had him on the last 2 CFL seasons, so certainly a delight as well. That's going to do it for me today. We will be doing our USFL recap show on Tuesday, I believe, next week. Jason Hussey will be joining me as well for our Monday recaps. Hope you guys are enjoying those for the CFL. I think we're going to do probably a live kickoff to the championship game here with the USFL, if that's the words I'm looking for, next week for Friday. So look for information from that. I'll reach out to everyone kind of now, figure out if we want to do something pre-recorded or live, but keep a lookout on the Twitters and Facebooks. I'll keep you guys updated for that, but should have a live show next week, getting ready for the big USFL championship game, which happens to fall on my birthday. So kind for the USFL to do that. Also Canada Day, a day so infamous in Canada, the Markcast birthday, that Canada decided to make that a national holiday. So hope you guys enjoyed the episode. We'll see you at the end. Take care. Well, we tried to get this gentleman on for the rookie draft. Busy guy here, but I said this is almost better because we kind of do the knee-jerk reaction stuff, and I do like a little bit more. Rick's prepared here. We have grades and a little bit more formal on this. So we're talking all the XFL, the hoarding talent here, all the XFL offseason signing stuff. How are you doing, Rick?
I'm doing great, Reed. Happy to be here and excited for all the new players getting an opportunity in the XFL. Great opportunity for these young men on the outside, maybe not in a training camp or futures contract. Hey, there's plenty of opportunities in the XFL, and I'm pumped up to shed some insight.
Yeah, so, when the USFL did their college draft, it was in February. It was kind of pre the NFL. Do you like the timing of how the XFL here, where it's kind of mid-June, we're giving players a sense of direction here? Do you like kind of how they're looking at it? Is it better or worse?
Well, I think that I do like that the season ended and there's something to talk about, right? Now, I do wonder, hey, a player gets his rights taken by the XFL. Well, there's going to be probably another 9 months or so here until we report to training camp. So what happens when they get approached by other leagues or they get signed and picked up? So I think there was a significant strategy involved because you're trying to identify guys that you believe will still be available to you 9 months down the road. So you want to draft talent, but you might not want to draft a guy who's too good because chances are he might get picked up. So it was fascinating to me to see the individual team approaches in terms of strategy and how they selected the players, and we can dive into some of that.
Perfect. So we'll go here. I've got both tabs up. I guess we'll start with the rookie draft, kind of since that was the first thing, kind of get your thoughts on all of that as we go through. Okay. So what do we got here? I do want to just start with Arlington and go down. You said you've identified some key players of each. How do you want to tackle this?
Yeah, so, starting with the draft, I don't really think that players should worry too much where they were taken, what round they were taken. I think the bottom line is here, you're going to have an opportunity to compete. And if you were drafted as opposed to being an undrafted free agent, well, chances are the team probably likes you a little bit more than some of those other guys. But I think what's great about the XFL, they don't care where you come from, FBS, FCS. They don't care about the helmet sticker. So once you get into training camp, anybody has a shot. And Cy Barnett out of Davenport, man, I wrote about this young man leading up to the NFL draft. He led the team in receiving. He led the team in punting. Oh, by the way, he's the field goal kicker as well, handles kickoffs. This guy, what can't Cy Barnett do out of Davenport? I think he's going to bring a lot of excitement to the XFL, almost like a jackknife And I know special teams has been talked about a lot in the alternate football universe, but how exciting is it? A guy who could come in, make a 60-yard touchdown catch, stay in the game, kick the extra point, kick the kickoff. Oh, by the way, we can punt too, so I like that. Connor Degenhart out of New Haven. I really like this young kid. I thought he was one of the top 20 or 25 quarterback prospects in the 2023 NFL draft. Now, Reed, there's a big hole in the scouting community in the NFL because there's this big groupthink box. And because Connor Degenhart, who actually led the FCS, I think, in passing the 2 years he was at Holy Cross. But then I kept asking all my Northeast scout friends, hey, did you see the New Haven kid? What do you think of that New Haven kid? Hey, that New Haven kid's a player. But because he wasn't on the Blesto or the national, teams didn't go in. They didn't give him a look. They didn't even take him seriously. This kid is a dual threat, 6'6", 235-pound, cannon arm quarterback, 4-year starter. Connor Degenhart. Remember that name. I think he could be a star in the XFL. And then Merlin Robertson out of Arizona State, one of these super seniors who at one point was being talked about as a potential next level prospect. Didn't really take his game to the next level. Had success early on in his Sun Devils career, but then kind of plateaued. So now he's going to have an opportunity to show off some of that pass rushing prowess for the Arlington Renegades.
In terms of Arlington, and I think in the off whatever ones they claimed yesterday, I think there was another quarterback here, but with the Renegades taking Connor, taking the quarterback, and obviously we did Luis and kind of all that stuff. Does that tell you anything about how they're looking or approaching that, or kind of just stockpiling right now as they can?
Well, I think the quarterback position. I don't care what league you are, you can never have enough of them. Look at the Memphis Showboats, for example. So to me, and look at the NFL. You're only one snap away from your backup quarterback. And look at the situation that Arlington ran into last year at the quarterback position. And then you see the success that Luis Perez has enjoyed. Well, if I'm an NFL team, I would love to have him as a camp arm, as a 90-man roster camp invite. And then again, you come in and you're a thrower, you start impressing and say, hey, maybe we should sign this guy to the practice squad. So I think Arlington kind of saw the writing on the wall. Hey, we might lose Luis Perez. This is a good-looking player. Let's draft him. And, I can dive into the free agents, or we can keep that separate however you want to work it.
Yeah, why don't we do that? We can do the Arlington free agents here as well. Let's do that.
Yeah, so Noah Henderson out of ECU, again, a multiple-year starter, offensive lineman. I kind of projected him as a guard at the NFL level. He may get a chance to stick at tackle for the XFL. So I think he's going to come in, compete for a starting job. Noah Taylor out of North Carolina, linebacker, started off at Virginia, very good physical specimen, probably a strong side linebacker, can get after the quarterback, set the edge against the run, and even drops back in pass coverage for a big man a little bit. So Noah Henderson out of ECU, Noah Taylor out of North Carolina. Bob Stoops tapping into his college resources there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, he's probably got, some of these guys, but Bob and his staff may be a leg up on that just in terms of relationships and things. I don't know if that makes any difference at all or not.
Yeah,
anything else from the Renegades? So, so you have Connor Blumrick as well, quarterback out of Virginia Tech. So, yeah, definitely kind of picking up as many as they can right now, kind of wanting to figure out what they're going to do coming into camp.
Yeah, overall, I did letter grades, initial reaction. I gave the Arlington Renegades an A-. I actually thought they had the second best overall draft/free agent signings.
Well, it's interesting too because, and we were talking on the the draft show we did last week. You have some of these teams. Okay, we've had issues anyway. We need to figure out right. We need to work on our defense or whatever. But then some of these teams, like the Defenders, we have a bunch of these guys signed to the NFL. Then you just got to make up for the holes that you have. So you're kind of getting holes in two different directions here. Whether it's hey, we were so good, now we have players that are getting taken, or we really need to shore up whatever issue of our team.
Yeah, and I think also the common denominator amongst all the teams is offensive linemen, right? Whether they drafted them or signed, every team is looking to add depth and competition at the offensive line position.
Yeah, I remember we had Eric Galco on here, God, like year and a half ago now, talking about that he said, come with all these leagues competing, quarterbacks and O-line. And he said back with XFL 2020, they had a list of, unsigned offensive linemen that they could bring in if there was injuries. And he said when COVID shut that league down, he said there were very few names on that list of the people that they could still call up. And that was only 5 weeks into the season. So.
Absolutely.
So A- for Arlington here. I guess we'll go back. DC Defenders here, starting off on the rookie draft.
Yeah, DC Defenders. Now, I remember when we recapped their initial draft before the season, we talked about, man, they're going to run and gun and look to run some spread formations, look at all the wide receivers. And again, they had success with their wide receiver unit. I think Von Hutchins kind of doubled down here with two big playmakers. Ty Scott out of Missouri State, again, an FCS under the radar prospect who, quite frankly, had some concerns amongst the scouting community in terms of whether he could separate, okay, coming from that small school competition caliber of talent. Well, guess what? Now he'll get to prove in the XFL that he can be a big-time playmaker at the next level. And CJ Johnson, again, ECU, very productive, can make a lot of plays over the middle, can play outside, inside. I think Vaughn saw an opportunity that, hey, we might lose some wide receivers. To your point, Reed, let's double down. And then again, Jack Plumbo out of Iowa, a polished offensive lineman. The Hawkeyes do one thing. They take 2- and 3-star recruits, they coach them up, and by the time they depart, they have a fundamental baseline that can really serve as a low baseline, right? So the ceiling might not be as high for a Jack Plumbo, but you know what you're getting. Very fundamentally sound, a polished player. And then Alex Jensen out of South Dakota, a multiple-year starter. And those two guys, again, whether they come in and compete for a starting job or provide depth, I think it's going to serve them well. I gave the DC Defenders a B, and I did have Josh Falo out of USC, a tight end, as one of the undrafted free agent signings. He caught my eye. At one point for the Trojans, he was a bona fide pass-catching target, and he did run into some injury struggles there throughout his collegiate career. So if Josh Falo can kind of get back on track health-wise, I think that's another, again, passing target for the DC Defenders quarterbacks in the passing attack.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see where they go. I don't know. We're still kind of waiting. Does Teamu get picked up somewhere? And, he kind of bounced around last year. So I'll be curious kind of if they really need to reevaluate kind of what their core identity is or if they can run it back. They bring, Derek King, right, as kind of the primary guy here moving forward.
Absolutely. Correct.
Moving on here. What do we got? Houston Roughnecks coming up.
The Houston Roughnecks, yes. And I will say that Bob Morris was locked in all week at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl. He was there for the duration, and he was looking for talent. And he took a number of our guys from the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl, some of them that I was shocked, quite frankly, that they're still available. Let's start off with Lindsey Scott out of Incarnate Ward, coached by G.J. Kinney. And I'll tell you what, 5'10", but if you look at the frame read, he's very similar to a Kyler Murray. The arm strength is not much less than a Kyler Murray. The scrambling ability is arguably just as good. And if you remember Charlie Ward back in the day, he was probably about 30 years too early for the NFL. But Lindsey Scott, to me, is the reincarnation of Charlie Ward. I think this guy, along with Connor Degenhart, who we talked about with Arlington, I think Lindsey Scott is a guy who could take the league by storm. I really do. Another dual threat, 7th-year senior Reed. He's got a lot. I think he accounted for 70 touchdowns passing and rushing this past season. And then Michael Ayers out of Ashland. I am stunned that they were able to acquire this young man. He is an NFL talent. He came out of high school unranked, a defensive back, 185 pounds soaking wet, bulked up 40, 50 pounds during his time in college, became a linebacker, very good coverage skills, flies to the football, great lateral coverage, a true athlete. This Michael Ayers, man, this is what the XFL is all about, developmental prospects, and Michael Ayers is a great one, as is Jason Adamola out of Notre Dame, tweener, right? Lacks the arm length, lacks the prototypical height. But, man, he started several years there for the Fighting Irish, showed glimpses. I think he can be productive in spurts. I'm curious to see how they're going to use him on the inside. Outside, is he a kind of versatile defensive lineman that they move up and down the line? I think he's going to make an impact for the Houston Roughnecks, and that's why I gave them an A. I thought Bob Morris had the best draft, and I like Braden Johnson, the undrafted free agent out of Oklahoma State, whether he plays wide receiver or tight end. I think that'll be a nice pass-catching target for their offense.
The interesting thing, too, about Lindsey Scott is he was obviously a couple of the players picked up by both the USFL and the XFL. So they'll be curious kind of, we've talked a lot about how these drafts are kind of like the Canadian neg list where, if you come in, but, you might never step foot in there. Like, be curious to see, do you do the XFL and then if you get cut or it doesn't work out, I don't think the USFL is going to say no at that point. I mean, do you find it interesting that both these leagues are kind of taking competing philosophies here in terms of kind of getting these rights taken up for teams?
Well, I think it's an arms race, right? Whose pockets are deep enough to last for the long haul. And as much as I want to see both leagues be sustainable and survive, I don't know if that's going to be the case, Reed, and hopefully it's not the case. But I think that the XFL is really not paying attention to what the USFL is going to do. They're going to go about their business. And I do believe XFL has secured the greater level of talent. And so, therefore, I believe that the demand or the desire for the street free agent, at least, their preference is going to remain the XFL. At least that's my understanding from the community and individuals I've spoken to.
Interesting. Do you attribute that to better scouting, better, directors of player personnel kind of doing what do you attribute that to?
I think in the 2023 landscape, Reed, the industry that we're in, the players that we're targeting, a lot of it is about the pizzazz. The Rock brings sex appeal. They just have a more significant presence. And when you look on the TV channel, there's more than 100 people in the stands. That counts for something post-COVID.
Shots fired here.
No, I'm not firing shots. I'm just being honest that when I turn on the TV and there's 87 people in the stands, I say that's an issue. That's all. I think it's valid.
Anything else from Roughnecks? You said you gave them, what'd you say? Great. Did we get a grade for the Roughnecks?
Well, hey, Roughnecks, I gave an A. Bob Morris, hats off to you.
Yeah. All right. Let's go here back. We got rookie draft here. We're flying through this. This is good. Orlando
Guardians. Okay, so Brock Martin out of Oklahoma State. He's another guy, highly productive, inside, outside. What I like about Brock Martin, Reed, is he can bring pass rush from the interior. That's a rare skill set. A lot of times you get opportunities at the NFL level when you can do that. But I think Brock Martin, again, he's got those alligator arms. He's going to scare off NFL decision makers. And so he'll get an opportunity to come in and make his presence known. Darius Joyner out of Duke, another P5 pedigree, can play safety, can play corner. We'll see, kind of where he settles in on the defensive side. And then on the offensive side, I thought Jarrett Horst from Michigan State. The Spartans are another program. They have a long history of putting undrafted free agent offensive linemen in the league. And that's, again, because of their ability to cross-train players and then teach them the fundamentals. So Jarrett Horst out of Michigan State was the guy that caught my attention on the offensive side. They also signed a Fighting Irish, Bo Bauer, the linebacker, an undrafted free agent. Orlando, to me, I felt like had one of the more disappointing rookie drafts just in terms of impact. I think Brock Martin will make an impact, but I guess, from the skill positions, I felt like Orlando needed to build on the skill positions. I did not see them achieve that, so I gave them a C+.
It's interesting, too. Yeah, we've had on Buckley kind of postseason, and then he was on our pregame show for the championship game. Self-admittedly, they did not do a great job team building last year. I think you would have him say first and foremost, he had never done this, and trying to bring in Larry Lee and kind of figure all this kind of stuff out. Interesting that you feel like they haven't taking that next step here, even kind of with a year and knowing like, okay, these are the things we need to kind of focus on?
It's hard. When you've never done it before, there's an adjustment period. And I think, you see some of the titles, some of these. Bob Morris worked in the NFL, right? Von Hutchins, I always go back to, has been scouting these guys for the last several years. When you're not living that life and then you come in and try to play catch up, you're competing against others who have 3, 4, 5, 10-year head start. It's not it's easy for us to sit here in our chairs and say, oh, that was great. Oh man, they blew that opportunity. Listen, there's more than just talent, right? It's about scheme. It's about fit. It's about DNA, right? It's about a person's attitude, right? Because again, we see this with the CFL. The biggest lesson to be learned, a guy like Brock Martin, I never met him personally. I'm just going to use him as an example. Oklahoma State, big time player, all conference. Someone like that, they might have an ego, right? They go up to the CFL, they get their ass kicked, right? Because they think, I got it like that. But that's not the case. There's a high level of talent in the CFL, the XFL, especially with the starting teams, okay, where you see the bigger separation of quality is the depth, right? The 2s and the 3s. But in terms of the starters, the XFL, the CFL, I think they're both very formidable. And that's why you've got to kind of meet these men. You've got to sit down. You got to talk with them. You got to understand where their head is at. You want to pick their brain and know, like, what is your why? Why are you here? And why do you want to participate in this league? Because there are a lot of players, Reed, who feel like they're too good. And there are a lot of players, and I'm not knocking this either, it's NFL or nothing. And they have a clear vision, and I respect that, okay? Everybody is a case-by-case basis. The hardest thing to measure, heart and head. I say it all the time, and that's why there's a need for scouts. That's why there's a need for general managers, and that's why, you bat 300, you're doing great.
Well, and like you said, there needs to be, even if you're only buying into the XFL for that one season or, USFL to get to that, like there has to be a level of buy-in and kind of like, why are you here and what's your why? And whether you're going to be here for, 3-4 years, you're going to be here for a year, like you at least got to be committed while you're here and kind of go for it.
Absolutely.
So C for them. I love Terrell Buckley. So I wish if they performed on the field like they do, with everything else.
I loved him coming out of Syracuse too. I remember he was a good player.
Coming up here, San Antonio Brahmas, Heinz Ward and company.
Yeah, the Brahmas. I'll start off. Jaleel Billingsley out of Texas. Okay, came over from Alabama, lost the starting job to Latu, followed Sarkisian over to Texas. Left the program just this past season. Okay, so there was a lot of questions about his commitment to the game. We just talked about this, right? The love for the game, the passion for the game. And so he was another player we had at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl. At one point, Jaleel Billingsley was thought to be a top 100 overall NFL prospect. So here he is now, very athletic, very limber, okay? And now I heard he did very well in his team interviews at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl. Apparently not well enough, because here he is now. He's going to have to go prove himself. And again, teams want to see that level of commitment. Does he come in? Does he work his ass off? Does he earn a starting job? Does he dominate the level of competition? If Jaleel Billingsley checks off all those boxes, he'll be playing in the National Football League in 2 years, right? That's the journey. Okay, I love the pick, by the way. Chris Smith out of Louisiana Lafayette. He was probably the best looking running back down at the Tropical Bowl this past season. And the Tropical Bowl pulled some good players. Chris Smith, very good between the tackles runner, capable hands out of the backfield. I like his ability to fit into the kind of rotation and add a little bit of variety to that San Antonio backfield. On the defensive side, Lorenzo McCaskill, the linebacker, was the guy who stood out to me, who I think could come in and make some noise. And then you've got the undrafted free agents, Luke Ford out of Illinois. I saw them list him as a wide receiver. I believe he was a tight end for the Illini. So I don't know if that was a typo or they want to try him at wide receiver. I would imagine his natural fit, though, is at tight end. And then Nazir Wright, I got to give a shout out to my guy out of William Patterson. And that's the things that get me excited, is that whereas the NFL, you do have teams, scouts, decision makers, who's going to stand on the table for a guy from William Patterson? Not too many individuals. And that's what I love to see. Guys like Nazir Wright get a bona fide, legitimate opportunity. And so I gave the Brahmas a solid B.
I appreciate the insights here in the stories. I think, and this is why you're a good person for this kind of fit to come in, because it's really hard to sell this as exciting, right? A lot of this kind of, we're talking here off season, whatever. But I think for casual fans or people like me, I don't know any of these players, and so getting the insights from you, I think it's incredibly helpful in kind of rounding out people's thoughts about this. So I really appreciate that. I think it's very helpful.
That's why I enjoy being here, Reed.
So Brahmas. Okay, so anything else on them? We'll move here. What do we got? Sea Dragons here. Mueller and Company. This is obviously a team close, near and dear to my heart. So how do we do?
Well, you'll be happy to know I gave them a B+, right? So they had the third best draft in my book, and that's because Titus Swen from Wyoming. Whoa, buckle up. This young man made a very strong case to be the NFL PA Bowl MVP. If you go back and watch this year's edition, he toted the rock, I think, close to 20 times. And he really broke a lot of tackles, busted off big runs. You talk about yards after contact. You better wrap up Titus Swen out of Wyoming. I thought he made a strong case for MVP of that game. Colby Reeder out of Iowa State. This is an instant impact guy. For the Cyclones, you might remember his brother Troy Reeder. They played together at Delaware. Colby Reeder now is 27 years old, another one of these seventh-year seniors. Had a lot of injuries along the way, but when you talk about 41-inch vert, 4.5 40, prototypical modern-day linebacker size, does an excellent job setting the edge against the run now. I think he's the prototypical weak side linebacker. Now, will Colby Reeder want to participate at 27 years old? Is he about that journey trying to get to the NFL? Because he will have to play another season, and then he'll be a 28 or 29-year-old trying to break into the NFL. That's the fascinating backstories, right? Everybody loves the story of an underdog. I'll tell you what, Colby Reeder's story is fascinating. And then how about Sam Burt and Malcolm Lee and that Kansas Jayhawk program, the turnaround that they enjoyed? And that's because of these two young men on the defensive side. And so they tapped into some of that Jayhawk success. Hopefully that breeds off on the rest of the team. And then in terms of the free agent that is going to be intriguing, how about the N'Kosi Perry out of Florida Atlantic? He's just a big-bodied quarterback, can sling it around, very consistent. But there was enough flashes there, right, that shows the tantalizing upside. And so I don't think N'Kosi Perry is a guy that's going to come in and replace Ben DiNucci. But I do think he's a guy that you want to have around, because the right coach might say, hey, I can work with that. Give me a year to just groom him, teach him the verbiage of the offense, tweak some of those mechanics, get the upper body in sync with the lower body. And then suddenly you might have a player here. And that's where the quarterbacks like N'Kosi Perry, who have enjoyed success at the collegiate level, they need those reps. I say it all the time. Nothing replaces in-game bullets. You cannot teach experience. And so, yeah, I thought there was a great balance, by the way, on both stacking the offense and defensive side of the ball for the Seattle Sea Dragons.
Well, the other thing you said was bringing in this N'Kosi Perry, I don't know how long Ben DiNucci's leash is here with the Broncos, right? And if that is going to pan out for everything he wants. I don't know if DiNucci is about that life of coming back and doing the XFL again. I think this is like, we did this and it was fun, and now I don't see him making a second return here. So I don't know if Montez is the answer. I think they had Harrison Frost as well. So, no one else really saw. I think Montez got one snap or something in the game. So, we certainly need to figure out something there with Seattle without DiNucci. Going here, what do we got? St. Louis next?
Yeah, the Battlehawks. So we got a couple guys here that stuck out to me. You know, I am fascinated that this Nico Bolden out of Kent State did not get picked up by the NFL. Now, he was dealing with a hand injury. We had him out at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl as well. But talking to Nico, looking up at this man, 6'4", right, 220 pounds, kind of that Cam Chancellor-esque type of safety. Okay, go look at the production, through the roof, dangerous with the ball in his hands. Now, I do think the medical did not check out well, which is why he was still available. But man, this might arguably be the best player chosen in the draft overall. Nico Bolden out of Kent State. Matthew Jester, I got to show love. You guys may or may not know I'm based here in New Jersey. But again, out of Princeton, right? Something tells me, Reed, that maybe that Princeton degree could be put to better use and earn more money than in the XFL. But again, where's his head at? Does he just love the game so much that he wants to play? So that'll be a storyline that we pay attention to. And then they drafted a tight end. They signed a tight end. And I like both of them for their on-field talents, at least. Kamor Gamble out of UCF kind of had a streaky career. And then he was drafted. Kamari Averett was signed. And I think this was probably the most controversial signing or selection, because if you don't know the story of Kamari Averett out of Bethune-Cookman, former P5 pedigree, off the field incident has been well documented. I'm not going to discuss it here. It can very easily be found. I'm going to stick to his on-field talent. Maurice Jones-Drew told me that he might be the best player in attendance at the NFLPA Bowl. Maurice Jones-Drew loved this man. We sat back, watched him make plays all week long. Big-time pass catcher, 6'5", 240 pounds, runs like a deer. The man obviously has some talent. Anthony Becht took a chance. Anthony Becht rolled the dice. And so I am going to be fascinated to see what comes of it. And then Dom Peterson out of Nevada, another free agent signing I want to mention, lacks the true size maybe to play in the NFL, 6 foot, 300-pounder, maybe doesn't check off the boxes from a measurable standpoint. But again, got after the quarterback there, made a bunch of plays. And that is somebody where, you know, if he wants to have a professional football career in an alternate league, Dom Peterson, you know, that's the kind of guy that maybe it hangs around for a couple seasons, unlike a Ben DiNucci, who you mentioned. But overall, I liked what St. Louis did. I gave the Battlehawks, again, a solid B.
Oh, it's good. Like you said, and with some of these, you know, Kamari, it's, you know, it's league of opportunities here if they want to do that. And we've seen other players, you know, Kavontae Turpin, and people get, you know, kind of work through and get their way in.
Sean Oakman was another good example in the CFL. Yeah.
So last one here, go back to the draft. We got the Vipers here. Obviously with, you know, Woodson being gone, I think Joey kind of did a lot of the, you know, whatever for them right now, kind of in the interim. So what did you make? Because they're a little bit of a different situation here without the head coach.
Yeah, Joey Klinkels, I respect greatly. Again, this is just one man's opinion. I gave them a D, as in dog. I gave them the worst grade. It's okay. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I just didn't see a lot of players that stood out to me personally, right? And it doesn't mean that they didn't draft quality caliber players. It means that we talked about this in the beginning of the segment. Every organization has different strategies, and maybe they tried to find guys that said, hey, I don't think they're going to be in the NFL, but they fit in our system pretty well. And I think that's kind of the approach they took. Now, Robert Mitchell out of NC Central is a good-looking offensive lineman from the HBCU ranks, and I like that pick. I think he's a guy that's going to come in and compete for a starting job. A lot of the other players they chose, I had to go back and do some research on them, and I'm still learning and finding out about them. So either they did a tremendous job or a very poor job, and that's to be determined. You know, on the undrafted free agent side, the BYU defensive lineman, Lorenzo Fatu, he comes from a football family. So, again, guys that love the game, guys that came up with that football pedigree. And so those were like the two guys that really stood out for me on the Vegas Vipers in terms of impact. I don't see it, but I hope I'm wrong. And so they graded out with the worst draft. But hey, everybody has an opinion, and we know what we make of those, Reed.
Well, that's good. I appreciate it. Vegas has a lot of heavy lifting both on the field and off the field here coming into the season. So you would certainly like to see them not handicap it too much. Well, that was good. D, any other thoughts on this? And I know we have some other, Rick news here we're going to talk about, but anything else from the draft or the signings?
No, I just wish that there was more. I do believe that there is a thirst for live coverage. I give much props to you and the Markcast for hosting a live show or as close to live coverage that you guys could possibly provide. But I just have taking my industry related hat off, right? And just from a fan of the league, because I'm a big fan of the league. I expect and want more. That's me speaking as a fan. Like, there's a draft, sign me up. I want to know about it. I want to know what's going down. I want to hear about these players. I think that your statement of saying, man, I love the backstories, like, that's how you create a following. That's how you relate the fans to the players. And I think that the fact that we didn't have the backstories, or we didn't have the reaction from the coaches, or we didn't have live player interviews talking about how they felt about the whole experience, I go back to the wood analogy. Did the tree really fall? Because nobody was there to see it. And so to me, I want to see more. I get it. It's not something they're set up for, but a phone call to the kid over here, we could have made it happen. Come on, buckle up. But overall, listen, I like what the XFL is doing, and I just hope that they are able to sustain. We saw them burn through $500 million in a matter of months. The fact that they only lost $60 million, I thought was a job well done. Call me crazy, but I did not expect them to make money this year.
No, I mean, that whole story has just been frustrating, with all that coming out. But no, I know I think that there's an expectation when you call it a draft that there's something that's going to be done. Where like I said, if they were just going to drop the names like they did with this, I wouldn't call it that, or I wouldn't promote, because they're promoting it. Hey, we're signing all these players today, and all the teams are tweeting out this all last week. Why would they have just done what you did this week and just drop the list and go, here, we got these guys? Like, if you're not going to make a deal about it, and I talk with the league, and they just say, like, we know we need, like, we're next time. And, it's a next time until there's not a next time. And if you don't have enough interest in a lot of this stuff, that's kind of my thing, is at some point I want, USFL, if you could combine both of them, not merging, but just the philosophies of things where USFL made a really big deal of their college draft. And I don't think it really was a big deal, but they live tweeting and they had all this kind of stuff. And if you
a bigger deal.
Yeah. If you could marry that with the XFL, and I have issues with that, but that's for another day. So you have other exciting stuff here. What do we have going on? I saw when I was trying to find you to talk about the draft, I was like, what the heck is Rick's Twitter handle? What do we have going on? We're changing things around here. So what's going on?
Yeah. So, Reed, it's an exciting time for me personally coming on board. Going to make this announcement here. I haven't stated anything publicly, but, I appreciate the platform. I do believe the Markcast is really the authoritative voice for alternate football. So I appreciate the fandom and the following, and we're going to make a little bit of news here and just get it out there that I am joining the International Football Alliance as their executive vice president and director of international relations. What the heck does that mean, Rick? Let me explain. Before I do, I want to be clear, because I know a lot of well-respected individuals in the football community and industry that have already told me that I'm crazy. I hear you. I understand. And I get it. So with that being said, I want the listening audience at home to understand that this is not just the launch of a new football league. It is the growth of American pro football internationally around the globe. And the league mission And my personal mission is going to be to grow professional American football around the world. And we are based in Mexico. We're a Mexican-based league with American pro football rules. We'll have 3 teams in Texas, 3 teams in Mexico. In fact, we just announced the first ever team relocating from Mexico to Dallas, the Pioneers. And we have independent ownerships, but we're not coming in and saying, hey, we're bringing American pro football to the Mexican fan base. No, we are going to grow and develop the game from a youth level. We're going to develop youth programs in every city we're in. We're going to establish flag football leagues, women leagues, and it's to grow the game, not just the league, the game of football internationally. And that's our hope. That's our expectations. If you look at the logistics of where each team is strategically placed, they can all be shuttled on buses, okay? And so that will be the first season. We will have independent ownerships. We will be based in each cities. There will be no hub. We want to connect with the community and establish ourselves in the markets. We're going to kick off in June 2024. And there's more. We'll have a rookie draft in December. There's going to be 8 combines before then. The first one will be held July 29th in San Diego. There will be several in Mexico. We're coming to the Northeast, the Southeast, the Midwest, the West Coast, and we're going to find the talent. And they're going to be eligible for our draft. And they're not going to be just eligible for the International Football Alliance. We are working with strategic partnerships and relationships with other international leagues around the globe. There is a broadcast deal in place. I can't announce that yet, but I've been very impressed and blown away with the leadership and ownership groups, and I'm excited.
Well, now you get to, you got to put your money where your mouth is here, where it's been, we sit here and, we are critiquing whatever. Now you're diving head into this. What inspired this or brought this on for you to get involved?
Well, they called me and pursued me aggressively. I feel like that the past 20 plus years, I've been kind of grooming for this job, for this role, because here at the NFL Draft Bible, I've been boots on the ground, Reed, for the last 2 decades of living this life and providing players with opportunities. And now I get a chance to do it for the entire world. I feel like the future of American pro football is in my hands. That's how I look at it. And that's what I'm excited to do. I feel like this is the next challenge for me. I was so excited to learn that American pro football is now the second most watched sport in Mexico behind soccer. It has surpassed baseball. So there's a thirst for this in North America, and there is a huge thirst around the world. And we are going to empower other countries to be sustainable, educate and teach them how to develop their leagues. And we're going to work with other leagues. We're not in competition. We're going to work in association. And the salaries, I know, is going to be the first question. It's going to be very comparable to what you're seeing in these alternate spring leagues.
Well, this is exciting. I'm glad that we can kind of help be a part of this. You have a home here anytime you want to say anything or do anything. So I appreciate it. Anything else about this or anything else before we get out of here today?
I do have a couple things, RIC at IFA.football for any inquiries. Couple housekeeping notes. So in order to be eligible for the December inaugural draft, you have to compete in one of the 8 combines. We will immediately have a supplemental draft held in January, and then the free agency signing will happen in February, leading up to the June kickoff. Okay. There is some confusion there amongst a John Jenkins combine that players were told they were going to be in the IFA draft pool. The league office is currently investigating the whole situation, and any player who participated in that event, we will be reaching out to you to clarify your status, okay? But you will have the opportunity to be eligible for the IFA draft. And if you choose to come and compete in one of these other IFA affiliated camps or combines, if you did participate in the John Jenkins camp, we will waive your fee so that you can come and work out in front of the IFA decision makers, such as Hal Mummy, such as Mark Lozano, such as Noel Mazzoni, and individuals such as that magnitude. So we're looking forward to it. Stay on the lookout. Yes, my Twitter handle will now serve as everything IFA. Buckle up. The floodgates are about to open. And I appreciate you, Reed, providing the platform right here on the Markcast to get that news out there.
Well, Rick, I appreciate it. Like I said, a wealth of knowledge here. So, whatever you're involved in, and I certainly appreciate it. And we'll get you back on. But thank you so much, like I said, for doing the time and prep and kind of having all this ready to go. It means a lot. So thank you.
Sounds great.
Well, normally we go live every week. It's very rare now that we actually pre-record this, but I'm sure we'll still get into the same shenanigans today. We have Pat Rifino here. Pat, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I just got done practicing my long snapping. Try to do about 20 reps a day just in case someone calls. So
be ready. Yeah, be ready for the call. Well, we've had, Pat and I have been doing our Monday recaps or Tuesday recaps, USFL. Now, the USFL haters that we are have assembled our own all USFL team here for the Markcast. Pat has the article up. I will publish it on Friday with the article with the video here, and then we're going to take umbrage with the USFL list as well. So, any preface stuff before we get into this?
Not really. I saw a couple. Obviously, Mike did his own article. Luke Miller from Newsroom did an article. A meme was made by the network guys. So, I mean, I appreciate anyone who takes the time to physically write all this stuff down rather than, whatever. And I'm not trying to throw shade, but regardless, there are a lot of people who are putting out their stuff on Twitter and their platforms as well. So I think it's pretty cool, that a lot of people are in the community. I think there's only one other person I saw outside of News Hub to do an all XFL article, all league XFL, and I apologize to those watching that I didn't do one because we were kind of rolling pretty hard in the USFL season, and believe it or not, I do have a real job. I felt like we needed to do it. I had a little bit of time, so I had no problem doing it.
Well, and the cool thing about the all-USFL team kind of thing is you're able to, Magoo and stuff. Some guys are going to get accolades regardless, but it's good to kind of put a spotlight on some of the positions that maybe don't get as much pizzazz, or some of the players aren't, kind of going the whole way down, picking quarterback, positions all the way down, special teams and all of that stuff. So first off, USFL, what is it now? The USFL.com. I can never remember their actual thing. This was different than, the RJ Young, I think, had his standout halfway through the season with no offensive lineman or whatever. This is a little bit more full-fledged here. I don't know who exactly with the USFL put this together, but what stands out to you about the all-USFL?
The offensive lineman, and I believe Kyrie Woods was not on it. Offensive line is the hardest position to evaluate, right? And I'm pulling it up on my computer right now. So there were two guys that stood out to me, Marquise Lucas and I believe Kirk Kelly. Both of them did not get all USFL honors. They were the highest. Ben Cooper and Mike made a very good thing about this. Is Ben Cooper did 90% of the work for a lot of guys. You know what I mean? Obviously there's some football pizzazz in there that you need to figure out, but in the end, the grade is the grade for a reason, and 90% of the time, it is accurate and whatnot, and it does coincide with how, air quote, the popular vote of a lot of this comes down. So to see Kirk Kelly and Marquise Lucas not get any recognition was a little bit disappointing to me, in addition to Kyrie Woods as well. So I don't think he was selected either. at the safety position. I think he was the highest graded player during PFF. And I'm not saying that's end all be all. I think that'd be extremely irresponsible. But that's my opinion. I'm really glad. I felt like this gentleman, Adam Rodriguez, got snubbed last year. I think he was second in the league in sacks. Seeing him get the award this year, pretty solid in my case, or in my opinion. And then, I mean, so, and we'll kind of deviate off some of this a little bit, but I went with Ryan Navarro for my long snapper, and I know who cares about long snapping, right, outside of me. But there is a cult-like community that does, and the way I did it was as many snaps as you could have. Like the punting thing, you could take the statistics how you want, inside the 20s, hang time, this, that, longest punt, yardage. For me, with like the special teams position, it always comes down to volume. So like if you went 93 for 100. Obviously that's an even number, 93%. But like when you obviously up the volume, you're going to shine yourself for more missed kicks, or like, okay, you had 7 misses, but they were all from 55 and out. It's kind of like Sebastian Janikowski. They would try field goals with him from 60 plus, and it's like he had 5 missed field goals in a year, and it's like, yeah, they're all over 50 though, versus a guy who kind of took the cheap route and was hitting 40, 40, 40, 40.
Any other big sign? I saw like Boogie wasn't on here. Any other kind of big notable snubs that you saw kind of outcry today from the Twitter spheres?
Yeah, I mean, like, you really couldn't go wrong, in my opinion, with John Atkins, Toby Johnson, Boogie Roberts. There's only 2 spots. So it's kind of just like, who's your guy type thing. You know what I mean? And it's like, who did you like the most? It kind of goes... Like, I would flip coins on all 3 of those guys, and that's pretty much what I did, including the Pittsburgh Maulers defensive tackle, Isaac. I can't say his last name. It starts with an S. But, I mean, he was another guy that was up there as well. I mean, like, it kind of, in my opinion, it kind of gets a little goofy with that. Like, sometimes it's too close. You kind of wonder what was the deciding factor, and that intrigues me more, because if as long as any of 4 of those guys were, like, they're all going to feel snubbed, obviously, the ones who didn't make it. But regardless, like, at that point, I feel like it's more of a fan bias than an actual like analytical perspective of like, oh, Boogie didn't make it, or this guy did make it. And it's like, I mean, they all played really well throughout the whole year. And at some point, the line of demarcation gets, like, I put Boogie as my defensive tackle. But I just felt like he meant more to the team than Toby, and like other people could call me wrong, and Toby would call me wrong, and that's fine. But, it is an opinion-based rating for some of these less sexy positions.
No Matt Mangle as well, friend of the show on here. I mean, I guess no surprise, right? I mean, like Magoo and everything, some of these running back, Mark Thompson, Wes Hills. I mean, some of them I think are a little bit more cut and dry who you're going to have on there. What was the issues with Mark Thompson tweeting that he wished he played quarterback so he could get the MVP? Because USFL hasn't announced their MVP yet, but it's presumably Magoo. But is Mark Thompson trying to make the case that he should be MVP?
I mean, he had an opportunity to. And, I mean, Kavontae Turpin won it last year through playing in multiple facets of the game, whether rushing the ball, catching the ball, and returning kicks and punts, right? So it's like we're not in that NFL sphere where essentially the MVP is the best quarterback, right? Now, and we've talked about this a couple times where when Andrew Luck played, he was the most valuable player because of what they did without him, right? So it's like, TJ Pledger, to me, devalues Mark Thompson as the MVP a little bit because of how great TJ was the first 2 weeks when Mark was out. Alex Magoo came in, and granted, he put up some great stats and everything like that. He put up some great stats. It was really impressive and whatnot, but he came in as the backup. And to see what he did to that team, like the drop-off between him and Jamar Smith, like, non-existent, and if anything, they accelerated a little bit. So then you take, and I might be talking in circles here, that same logic with TJ Pledger to Mark Thompson, like if Mark Thompson's gone, they have another running back in there. They might be doing the same thing. Where as far as Magoo's gone, it's not happening with Jalen Morton. And we've seen Kyle Sloter. I think he improves a little bit. Because I think this team is better than the Breakers from last year. But regardless, Sloter's was banged up in the XFL. He was banged up all last year. We kind of know who he is at this point.
Anything else from this one? We'll get to your list over on the Markcast. Anything else from the USFL list?
I mean, Justin Hall, I get it. I don't really like the only 2 receivers, but I mean, I only put 1 running back in mine. So, I mean, pick and choose. I did give a fullback shout out on mine. It's a position, and the NFL does it, so why not us? It's my opinion. I can't fault any of these guys, man. We don't know what the actual analytics of the voting committee are. So until we do know, then we're kind of in that rock and a hard place as far as who's who and whatnot, if that makes sense.
So we have this up on here in draft mode right now. The Markcast 2023 All-USFL team. Hopefully I have this formatted correctly. We can edit anything if we need to here and publish when we go live. What do you have? Where do you want to start here?
I mean, we'll go. If not Magoo, then who? I'm willing to hear the argument. I don't hear anything. You know what I mean? I feel like everyone's pretty on board with that. Mark Thompson's a pretty easy pick for me. Wes Hills kind of fell off a lot, and there was more offensive weapons around him when we talk about value at the position. Thompson was the most valuable running back, you know what I mean? And I believe he is the second place in the MVP case. And then, you throw in whoever you want for position 4. Hell, EJ Perry for all I care, right? But then you go into, I gave Mason Stockey the fullback. He was my next one. A lot of teams obviously don't use a traditional fullback. He did a lot of, receptions out of the backfield, working as an H-back. The only person close to him is a friend of my show, Clint Sig, who, when he was out there, he was lining up in the backfield a lot. You saw some J.J. Wilson and Daniel Helm did some stuff, but in reality, it was Mason Stockey was the most traditional true fullback. And I do think that deserves a lot of accolades and recognition. So if Mason's watching this, just let people know, people care about your existence, you know what I mean? And that we see you doing the hard work. So I felt that was nice, Receiving core, Devin Gray, big shout out to him, over 500 yards, kind of got a little bit undershadowed with Corey Coleman there. Unanimous pick, Corey Coleman, I feel like is everyone's guy. Joe Walker had a really good season for the Panthers, through very versatile guy. Played on some special teams and whatnot, over 500 yards, led that Michigan team in receiving. The next one, Davion Davis, really with the absence of Victor Bolden and Marlon Williams getting hurt, really came the guy over there, became him and Magoo outside of Sternberger. Those guys combined for over 1,000 yards and I think 12 of Magoo's touchdowns. I don't think enough people talked about him, and after his, I don't know if the word struggles is appropriate from the Roughnecks of the XFL. Really great to see him, become a top 5 receiver in this league. I didn't do honorable mentions because, there's so many guys you can give credit to, but the Breakers receivers, Trey Quinn, all those guys, those 3rd and 4th spots can start becoming your favorite, your favorite buy. Who's your favorite guy? Thing is about Devin Gray that I wanted to throw in there is that he was their holder as well for the majority of the season. So the fact that he kind of did a double duty, and with the injuries that they had, and then essentially, Terry Wright coming on a little bit later, that guy did a lot of great work and worked really hard to be able to be put in a position to, help this team almost make a playoff run. Moving down the tight end, I put Jay Sternberger, set the new modern record for receiving touchdowns. Real cute there. But also the fact that it was really him and Davion Davis, but a random guy doing some good stuff, or CJ Marable having a good game. Sternberger had his drops and whatnot, but we didn't see as much of a tail off as we did with Sage Surratt, who just burst out of the gate. Offensive line, real fun position for me. Got a little lazy with it. I went with PFF for Kirk Kelly and Marcus Lucas as Shamarius Gilmore were some of the top-rated offensive linemen for PFF. That makes the job a little bit easier. And then when I start looking at these rankings, some of the things I didn't agree with. So that's when I decided to put Terry Poole in there, because Terry Poole, you really saw that Mahler's offense stabilize and get consistent. And when you do these PFF scores, if you give up a sack, it's the player that you are blocking. So with Troy Williams, with him running around and whatnot and doing all this goofy stuff, you might have your defensive player give up the sack. Well, the guy's been running around the backfield for 9 seconds. Someone's going to get lucky, and trip this guy up. Terry Poole, older guy, was released from the Generals, played in the XFL, the AAF. I know he's with NFL teams, but I don't know if he's played an NFL game. Regardless, he's like 31, 32 years old. Really loved what he did throughout the whole USFL season. And then there's a leadership presence as well. Noah Johnson, big thing I liked about him was how terrible the Michigan Panthers offensive line last year was. And while they weren't great, once again, the stabilizing force he brought to this team was outstanding and really was essentially what kind of helped them get to the playoffs. And then the leadership he showed along with Ryan Nelson and Verdarius Ham in that final game with a rookie quarterback is something that you don't always get on the stat sheet.
That's good. A lot of good work here going through. Any, I guess, surprises in terms of the number of players from teams? I mean, it looks like it's pretty well distributed. It's always funny you have a team like the Maulers that ends up getting a bunch of, hey, they're in the playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, last year they sent the most guys to the NFL, I believe. I think they hit 7 or 8 or 9.
It was them and like the Gamblers both. Like some of the worst teams ended up having most of the guys. It's always weird how that it just doesn't equate. I don't know if you blame coaching or whatever at that point of why they couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's just, the Gamblers' defense last year we've talked about a lot, like studs upon studs upon studs,
Moving down to defense here, what do you got?
So going to my defense, Breland Speaks, pretty easy choice. Boogie, John Atkins, John Atkins, I was really glad he got the air quote official All-USFL ranking. He's been a consistent disruptor. I've talked about him on the show a bunch of times. He had the Player of the Week nominee, but something about Boogie Roberts' game this year, while he's been such a face of this league, he came into the season way leaner, way stronger, firing off the ball. And to see his fundamentals, it didn't look like last year he was kind of just clogging holes. This year he was moving people. He's actually using more technique. And a lot of people don't realize I don't want to say he had a year off from football, but wasn't actively on, the waiver wires and everything like that from 21 to 22. So now you see him come back and, probably was training a little bit harder this time. So we're getting there to the point where it's like this guy really took, not that he didn't take it seriously before, but he stepped it up a bit. And then you saw the overall success of Tavino and Reuben Foster. And that, those are stats you don't always see with a defensive lineman is, clogging, taking 2 blocks so your linebackers can make all those tackles. Adam Rodriguez, underrated player. Last year he got snubbed. This year, from both many, many sources, he was, honored. And then Hercules Malafafa, talked about it a lot. I felt like every time I was watching him, he was making a play in the backfield or something like that, or disrupting plays in the backfield. It was really great to see, especially on that Stars game where he was moved from the right side to the left side and got the game-winning sack.
Moving on down here, what do we got? Frank and everyone else here with the linebackers?
I mean, I don't think many people are going to argue with Frank and Tavino. Pretty easy picks. Tizino, top 2 tacklers in the league. Tizino had a lot of interceptions, turnovers, game-changing plays. Ginda won Defensive Player of the Year or of the week 4 times this year. Diggs, playmaking type guy. Really came on late, strong in the season. Really liked a lot what he did, and he had a great last 2 weeks, which is really kind of what gave me a little bit of a recency bias for the guy as well.
Moving on down here.
Easy choice for me, Levante Taylor. While sometimes he kind of played, I don't want to use the word lackadaisical, but sometimes coverage kind of lacks, and he got really the benefit of the doubt from like, a bad ball or nothing. Overall, I don't think he gave up any touchdowns throughout the year. Sometimes it seemed like they didn't even look to his side of the field and whatnot. Really just, overall solid player, made a lot of great pass deflections. I think he was saying they were missing like 6 pass deflections from him as well. Though he didn't get any interceptions, he definitely felt like sometimes half the field was taken away. Brian Allen, overall pro, solid person up in the run, another leader on that team. I felt that he, was an additional stabilizing force and an underrated signing. I think last year he played with the Saints for a little bit after leaving the Stallions in 22. Real great player, in my opinion. Older guy. I think he's out of Utah, and just a great stabilizing force. Long body, taller corner, real athletic dude. While his stat sheet might not always be the most appealing, every time I saw that guy, it looked like he had, when they're running, I felt like a lot of times when I saw a big play and Brian Allen was on the field, he was taking away his option. And that's something that stood out for me. Mark Gilbert, 4 interceptions, another great asset to that Maulers team. And then kind of a little bit easy on the free safety port, Kyrie Woods, highest graded player on PFF, made my job a little bit easy going to that selection. And then Sholem Luani playing that center field, coming up in the box. I think, in my opinion, on the Panthers, Kai Nakua played a similar role, and I think he did better than him. However, Nakua didn't have as many reps. So I had to give it to Luani for the second year in a row.
Well, there you go. Looking here, moving down special teams. I know we got Mangle on here. Glad to see Luis Aguilar on here. Some of these are a little bit more obvious. Derek Dillon as well with the Showboats. Thoughts here on special teams?
I mean, we talked about it a little bit. Navarro, I think, led the league in reps for most snaps between the punts, field goals, and extra points. I think he led it by 6. I did the math for all of it, so it took me a minute to do it. So I kind of gave him that because I don't think I saw a bad snap from him. Granted, they had a block, but sometimes blocks aren't the snapper's fault. Mengel, a lot of reps. I think he had the second most punts in the league, real up there in yardage. Friend of the show as well. A little bit of a bias towards that. A lot of these punters. Yeah, I mean, Mengel and Miller were my 2 guys, and I flipped the coin. I had to go, and I'm doing a little shilling as well. I'm hoping to have him on my show at some point. Aguilar, I was going to put Kessman, believe it or not, because of the 21 made field goals, but something about putting the team on. He put the team on his back for about 3 weeks. They didn't score any touchdowns for 3 weeks, and I think he had 95 points, which was the most for the kickers. 1, and then 2 was second in the league. It didn't get much easier for that. Not much I can say about Derek Dillon. I feel like he was personally robbed. Led the league in all-purpose yards, 2 big return touchdowns. Split time at returner as well, and still managed to have almost 700 or over 700 return yards, I believe. But they opted to go. Who they go with? Excuse me. I think
I got it here. They went with
Josh Simmons.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't go punt returner. I just kind of went, just general return specialist. Isaiah Henney, I think personally was a good choice if you're going to break it down to 2. But Josh Simmons had some great returns, but I felt like Deion Kane was above Josh Simmons, in my opinion. But he also was out for a couple games and whatnot as well, I believe. So, I mean, someone's always getting robbed, right? And then they went with a specialist, Vinny Papali. I saw Papali make a lot of special teams tackles on kickoffs. They said a couple times after he scored a touchdown, he'd be making the tackle on kickoff. Good for him. He's invincible. Maybe it was a a thing for his father, you know?
Oh, that's great. I know it's crazy. Like the thing to turn around of that, what some of these players are doing double duty out there is pretty crazy.
And we talk about that in nauseum, right? Like, I don't need Vinny Papale to put up 600 yards in the USFL to prove to me he's an NFL player. I need Vinny Papale to average 7 yards a return, well, probably a little bit higher, 12 yards a return, and make tackles on, you know, for example, a guy like Joshua Cribbs, who's not in the NFL anymore, obviously, but a guy like that, you know, that's what I need.
Well, I think you've done good work here. We'll talk about the playoffs here before we get out of here. Anything else from your list, USFL's list, anything else on this?
Not really. And, you know, I hope, you know, and who are we, right? We're just a couple of jabronis doing this. But, I mean, I just hope, you know, some of these guys don't get caught up in these awards. You know, like Tyler Huntley went to the Pro Bowl last year over some other quarterbacks, like 2 touchdowns. You know what I mean? Like Taylor Heineke, well, you know, different division or conference, but you get what I mean. Like, hopefully, you know, and I've seen some people tweet out the other outlets, and, you know, while we might not always be as friendly every day, it is good to be recognized, and I'm glad that there's so many different facets to this and whatnot, that like someone out there can feel that someone who has no allegiance to them in a way was recognized, you know, and that makes people feel good. And I mean, you got a pretty decent following on Twitter and whatnot, and, you know, depending on the day, my tweets get, you know, retweeted by Mike Florio. So, I mean, it's less about us and putting the content out there, believe it or not that. And I don't want to come off as like a participation trophy guy, but more for these guys to know that people care, that they're putting their body and the lives on the line to entertain us and have them reach their goal. So I'm glad I could do that, and that my list was different than the USFLs, because I did this before they came out.
Well, I think it's good. I think it's valuable. I think, you know, like we joke every Monday or Tuesday on here, you know, we get a lot of grief for all of the USFL stuff and, you know, hating the league or loving the league, whatever. Like, you know, having gone through and watched all the games like you have and broken down and analyzed all of them that we have every Monday or Tuesday, it's good. I think it's a good stamp. I think it's a good kind of showcase of your work and just kind of attention the entire season and kind of be able to, you know, put a bow on it and say, these are people that stood out to you and this is why. And I think it's good. Like I said, I see a lot of people talk online that don't produce content at all. And so whether it's you or the newsroom guys or whoever, like putting out the content, like actually putting the work out, I think speaks volumes versus like, oh, I tweeted something funny. Like, isn't that neat?
Yeah. And I mean, that's the goal is, you know, we might make 1 or 2 guys' days feel better. And, you know, that makes, you know.
So we did our just before we get out of here, we did our playoff kind of preview a little bit on the Tuesdays thing. Any updated thoughts on either the South Division with the Breakers and the Stallions, or with the Maulers and Maulers and Panthers in the North?
Not right now. I mean, we're still waiting on more information, you know. I mean, I don't have depth charts. I know the Stallions brought in Ryan Pope, was the most recent signing and whatnot. Injury reports haven't come out, so it's a little bit hard to be like, oh, you know, because how many times do you feel like X player is doing X thing, and then, you know, like, yeah, this guy had a great game, and you find out on Monday he had a torn hamstring. Well, homie ain't playing anymore. You know what I mean? So it's like, I can't, you know, it's a little bit hard for me to deviate off my path of where we've had, you know, a lot of this stuff going on originally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just weird. Like, I was thinking about this too, because, you know, we've obviously lamented, you know, the communications and everything, and certain hubs being better than others, and, you know, providing players and whatnot. You know, half the teams are gone now, right? You know, that aren't in the playoffs, and then this will all move on. It's just weird. I mean, we saw the ratings this week down. You know, we can, I guess, touch on that, but, you know, we kind of we've said the similar things every week on here with the declining ratings, but it does feel like this kind of just a wet fart then evaporated into the distance here. I mean, we'll see what the weekend ratings are, but I don't know. I just felt like going through the XFL season, having the league, you know, continually helping, you know, all the different content creators with like interviews and content, and this is what we're doing. Like the USFL, it feels like it exists such on its own island. I know they give Stefan and them, players from time to time. We've certainly had guys on earlier in the season when I was a little bit more motivated to keep following up, but I don't know. It feels like they're just going to kind of move on here. It doesn't feel like we've lived through this the same way we do with the XFL, and that's probably my homer in me. But it does feel like we were a little bit more invested, like all together in that kind of moving on here.
I mean, we had, and I'm sure some people are doing it, some of the local outlets. I've seen some stuff, but I cover the Battlehawks weekly Zooms, you know what I mean? And maybe that's like the trajectory for next year. Something that I'm not trying to there might be one person wearing a lot of hats. I know there's one, he's doing a lot of different things. So sometimes things just kind of are like, okay, I need to knock out my big checklist, and whatnot. So I feel like sometimes, things are just a lot's going on, and, I don't want to like poo-poo us or like any media outlet or even like air quote more established ones. It's just like, there's a lot going on and I got to move all this stuff around and we have to do this and we have to do that. And it's like, we don't have time to do Zooms with everyone, once a week and whatnot. And like, I think, and it's kind of hard. It's not hard. It's not easy, but I feel like at some point you become in a routine once the season starts and whatnot. I know Memphis did a good job with like open media practices and whatnot. But I'm not in Memphis. You're not in Memphis. So it's a little hard to do stuff like that, So I give that Memphis Sullivan branding out there a lot of credit because I was getting those emails all the time and they were doing a lot of stuff. Detroit had that transition of like who was doing their stuff as well. I mean, Heather's done a lot of good stuff as well. But I think right now it's just, I would not be surprised in the future if we went from 0 to 60. Because I feel like people are hearing what we're saying. And not when I say we, I mean like everyone, you know what I mean? And I feel like how these leagues, they all air quote, work together, but how they, take bits and pieces and whatnot, like everyone's going to probably see what works for them, what doesn't work for them and whatnot. And I think from there, we could see a lot of growth. And I'm hoping like, for us, we're a little bit more involved next year and whatnot. But both you and I are not in those markets. So that kind of like is where I'm just kind of like, well, would it be different if I was in Birmingham, if I was in Canton? Because Paul Woods was down. They gave Paul Woods, and Paul Woods is way different than you or I, but like they gave Paul Woods pretty much free reign from what I saw when he was doing his McLeod stuff. But, that might be just because of the history between him and McLeod, you know what I mean? It might have been a clause in the contract and whatnot. So
well, I think, I think too, it was like, because that was a little bit more preseason, right? I am not in any, we weren't in Arlington, but I was provided people from the XFL all the time, right? That were in Arlington. Like my thing is, and it's the XFL goes, it's all of the CFL's better because they have more, hands dealing with a lot of this with their teams. But it's this whole like, okay, we're out of season. We're not worried about this. Or like, we don't have time for this. Like it's out of season. And then once it's in season, it's like, we're so busy. Like we don't have time for this. It's like, so when are you going to have time for this? Because you don't have time preseason and you don't have time in season. USFL, I think once the season, I think those first couple of those training camps, like that's when I got on like Brandon Audrey and, that's when I had Case Cookers on and stuff like that was all preseason. It's like once the season starts, like, well, we don't have time for this anymore. Like, no, that's when people want to do this. That's when people are interested in this.
Yeah. I mean, I have no idea. I'd like to be down in Memphis next year a little bit more. And, depending on where I'm at with like my businesses and whatnot, like, because I offered to, go to Detroit and do like my own stuff and like, out of pocket, just things didn't line up. And it is what it is, just certain people getting back to me, everyone's busy. I get it. So I'm curious to see. I only think it like Memphis I use as a perfect example because they were doing like the open practices for media. Like I'm really curious to see if like I go down to Memphis and I spend a good month there, right? Excuse me. Like what's spending my own money, my own time, my own resources, and seeing what happens down there like how, not that I'm going to be a trendsetter or anything, but like, could that lead to more openness and whatnot? And I mean, you've seen my studio, you know what I mean, in St. Louis. And if I bring that down to them and I'm doing all my stuff, and it's like, could they get people who are way bigger than me, that are way more notable than me? And like, whether, you know, because in my opinion, you're one, like a guy that doesn't get talked about enough is Josh Butler on the Panthers. This dude's a social media superstar. You know what I mean? Like Julian Allen, social media superstar. They kind of did it with Chase DeMore. He's not very good at all. You know, he's kind of a meme, but like that's something that like I thought they could have used those platforms a little bit to kind of push things out, you know. And it's kind of like what the XFL did with Destroying that. I don't know if you knew. He had 5 million subscribers on YouTube, and it just seemed like he kind of was just doing it to do it. And I saw him in St. Louis on the sideline, and he was just kind of being there. You know, it seemed like he was more disinterested, like when the camera wasn't on him. Yeah. So I'm very curious to see, like, I feel like if you get one or two of these dudes who actually like cares about football and like not the way Destroying does and whatnot, and you get them to like put them on a podcast, you know, or something like that, like what does that do for a lot of this stuff, you know? Like, and that's kind of like one of my goals is like, you know, obviously get big enough so I can spotlight some of these guys, whether it be the USFL or XFL, and like get more people into this and whatnot. And like, I don't know, I feel like it's going to come, you know, working with the league. Hopefully we get to that point, and then more people kind of reach out or reach in. And, you know, I was a little disappointed. I don't follow Josh Butler on his like TikToks or anything like that, but you know, it would have been cool to see some of that.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll continue this. We'll have posts here on next week following the playoffs, and then we'll obviously talk post-championship game as well. So more time for this, but I think today this is a good stopping point. I appreciate the work for the All-USFL team. Like I said, we'll have that on the website and the links and all that stuff, and obviously all the work all season covering this and doing the recaps and stuff. So it's very much appreciated, Pat.
Yeah, no, and Reed, I'm honored to do it. You know, like I was on someone else's show last night, and it was just this has been what 20 almost. This will be, I think, week 19 going into week 20, and you know, if you don't count the preseason and whatnot, and well, it's been exhausting, and you know, a lot of guys like us who do both leagues are, you know, on fumes and whatnot. It's been an amazing experience, and I'm really glad that I've been able to, you know, be in your community and so many other people's community, both on the mainstream and, you know, in the freelance as well.
Yeah, I like the XFL only podcasts to take the season finale. We're coming back next year. I go, oh, okay, that's interesting. So now none of that here. Everybody back here every week. Pat Rifino, thanks so much again. Well, this is a gentleman we've had on before, and then I think it's like a Twitter thing. I think once you respond to someone's tweet, then like I've seen all your tweets last week. I said we need to get Derek Taylor back on here. It's been a couple times. How are you doing, sir?
Everything is pretty good. When the team you're calling games for wins games, you contribute nothing to them, but they win. You just the warm glow envelops you, and everybody's happy to talk to you. It makes my job pretty easy.
Yeah, so we're friendly now because obviously BC's playing Winnipeg. This will air after that. So right now we're friends because BC, that's America's CFL team, as I call it. But general thoughts on Winnipeg? I mean, we'll kind of do a rundown here, but I mean, feels like they haven't lost a step. They just kicked the snot out of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Michael Ball was like, well, it's still like we can still feel okay about this. I'm like, can we really? I mean, they look really good this year.
Yeah, their offense is as advertised. I thought it would be the best offense in the league. To me, it's certainly the best receiving core in the CFL, and it comes with the best quarterback in the CFL. I don't know that I expected 40-plus points in each of the first two games. Like, they're at practice talking about, yeah, we could be better, blah, blah, blah. And I just do the math and think, if you keep putting up 40 burgers, you're going to set the season record for points, right? Sure, it's early, but if you think you can get better and you start hanging 50s on the board, that the record I think for points is 698. They're going to blow past that. So it's been pretty great. Two guys have 2 touchdowns. Everybody else has 1. They're spreading it around. It's what I thought it might be at its peak, but it's happening in weeks 1 and 2, which is very unusual.
Because didn't last year I felt like Winnipeg started slower. They seemed to be more concerned last year going in versus, and then obviously it didn't really, they went all the way anyway. But it seemed like we're coming here hot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Last year it was 2 slogs against Ottawa. It was a low scoring game in week 1, and then some weather was a factor in week 2, but that was low scoring as well. And honestly, it was a lot of the same personnel. Right there was Greg Ellingson, and we didn't necessarily know what Dalton Schoen was at that time because he was just starting his career. The offensive line was virtually the same. The quarterback was the same. But yeah, they are a mile ahead of where they were to start the 2022 season.
Should Rough Rider fans feel good in their loss here? It was 27-45. I watched that game, and I know Trevor Harris looked good. It really didn't feel close to me. I know the score was closer, and then they didn't go for it, and settled for the field goal and kind of all that stuff. Should Saskatchewan Rough Rider fans feel good?
I think they should. If Janarian Grant doesn't make the return of a lifetime, that's a 3-point game, and Winnipeg has the ball on its own 20-yard line. And I think if you're Saskatchewan, you would feel pretty good about that. Hey, our defense, Winnipeg's offense is doing well against our defense, but our defense can show up, right? Their offense was roughly 2.7 times better than I thought it was going to be because they don't have their 3 best receivers. There's no Kean Schaefer-Baker. There's no Braden Lennius. There's no Darrell Walker. And all of a sudden, here's Samuel Emelis. Okay, here's 3 touchdowns from Samuel Emelis. And Harris threw it's going to be one of the top 10 passes from a quarterback in the CFL this season. He dropped one just over top of Dietrich Nichols' shoulder, too. I got to go back and see who the receiver was, but we're in the booth going, how does that ball get there? Because it gets this far over top of Dietrich Nichols' shoulder, who hadn't turned yet. And I thought, Harris is on. And if he is on, he's the second best quarterback in the CFL. And that's a great place to start for an offense that I was super impressed with offensive coordinator Kelly Jeffrey. I don't really know much about him. He wasn't their first choice, but he had it going.
Is Harris that big of an upgrade over Cody, or is it just that maybe we've gotten a better team around him? Because Cody and I were kind of feuded, and now we're friends. And Cody and I, he's a friend of the podcast, so I want to support my boy here in Montreal.
Yeah, I feel like I'm one of the few people who's still on Team Fajardo. I still think Cody is an accurate passer. I think what he can do with his legs is a real added dimension to his game. I'm still on Team Fajardo. I think it's an upgrade in a way I think they absolutely needed. Of Harris can just command everything, and the ball can be out fast if he needs it to be, right? That was his MO in parts of his career was, balls out. You can't get to me. We have a 2% sack rate because you can't get to me in time. I think he just adds something different. And Fajardo was injured last year. Let's not pretend that Fajardo didn't have some injuries he was dealing with last year. I'm still on Team Fajardo. I just think that a change just had to happen. But while it's Harris, it's also Jason Moss is out and Kelly Jeffrey is in, right? Offensive coordinator changes as well, and they'd hope to add some offensive line things. It's a lot has changed apart from Fajardo as well.
Was that the greatest top 3? I think John Hodge called it top 3 kickoff return of all time. Or punt return, whatever, kick return.
I struggle to think of ones. There are ones that are more important, right? So we kind of have to take the context of the game out of it, because Janarian returned one in the West Final, and he returned one for a touchdown in the Grey Cup. Those are bigger, right? Because it's in the Grey Cup, and oh my gosh, they now lead the Toronto Argos. But I mean, if you take the context of the game out of it, skill for skill, it's got to be top 3 all time, and I don't know what would be ahead of it, because he makes the first guy miss, and then he goes, "Well, I got to cut back now." And just when you watch it again, their special teams coach Paul Boudreau said that's as close to a guy doing it by himself as maybe I've ever seen. And you go, yeah, because when he cuts back, people can't hold their blocks or they're going to get called for a penalty. So you got to let him go. And then he stiff arms this guy, and then he stiff arms that guy, and then he stiff arms, he turned the corner and cut back. And it was incredible. When I listened back to the call I made at the time, I was impressed with making the first guy miss. And then, he cuts back. Okay, this could go really bad, or this might be something. But then just the nonstop guys falling off him, like Bo Jackson in Tecmo Bowl back in the day, right? Guys are just falling off him. It was incredible. And to add in the challenge element, and it essentially, to me, it almost ended that game that play stood, because all of a sudden it's a 10-point game and you've just been decimated by one of the greatest plays that we'll see, probably the greatest player we're going to see all year, even though there's still 19 weeks to go.
Oh yeah, like you said, it was cool that like, they went and they go, no, we've reviewed, like we've gone through and we've checked all of this and it all, because it is such a game-changing play at that point that they kind of got to go back through. In terms of, like I said, Winnipeg, BC playing, I think the original tweet I saw that got us on this was the horrendous Elks performance here, at BC. Shutout. I was very happy to see that, right? And so a couple things. First off, how bad are the Elks, I guess, right now?
Right now, really bad. Apart from the Geno Lewis 102-yard reception in week 1, what do they have? 200 yards passing at 50% rate. And the run game, which I think a lot of us thought was going to be really good because Kevin Brown looks like he can really hammer dudes and run that ball, hasn't picked up the slack. There was a point late in that game where TSN flashed the graphic where Geno Lewis had 1 target and 1 catch for something like 9 yards. Really, $320,000, and you throw in the ball 1 time? Yikes! And I'm not a Taylor Cornelius guy. I haven't been for a long time. I think he's just got a fundamental flaw that's just unrecoverable at this point. But there's so much else around him. And Stephen McAdoo, for all the flack he takes, has had success in the Canadian Football League. His offense might not be super intricate and super complicated and full of fakes and cool pre-snap motions and stuff, but they can get it done in Stephen McAdoo offense. So it's much less than I expected, even though I don't think Taylor Cornelius is particularly good. I really did expect more, and being shut out for the first time in 46, 47 years is interesting. I put a lot of that on Chris Jones and who he's picked to be his kicker, because if you can't, there are at least 2, if not 3 circumstances where every other team in the CFL would be trying a 50, 51, 52-yard field goal, and he runs out Jake Julian to punt because I'm guessing he doesn't trust Faithful as his kicker. You can't do that. You absolutely can't do that. You can't play field position and hope that Julian can maneuver every punt perfectly, or else you're going to turn, we drove to their 45 and we punted for a single and now it's at the 40. You're not going to win that way. So just get some points. If you have to go to get Mark Leggio, if Hamilton releases him, get a kicker and put your global somewhere else.
Well, I just don't get. There was a couple of tweets of the one, Taylor Cornelius. We've seen like 26 or whatever games now. Like we've seen enough of this. Like we kind of know. I just don't. Chris Jones. We're obviously newer to covering the CFL. Brought in, and everyone says, "Oh, it takes some time," and give him a couple. Like, at what point is he on the hot seat, or is he kind of should be more under scrutiny here?
Yeah, it's got to be coming, because it was interesting to watch. Certain folks believe in Taylor Cornelius or believe that Cornelius can get another shot, and they've kind of moved the goalposts on. Well, it's not year 2 where a guy develops; it's year 3. Well, and usually it's year 2 that we talk about this stuff. But I can understand, because I know smart football people who are huge Cornelius fans still, huge Cornelius fans, because he has this incredible ability for his size to run and navigate the pocket and scramble. And his arm is incredibly strong. It's probably the strongest arm in the Canadian Football League, just not real accurate, which is kind of an important part of that. And then it comes back to Chris Jones committed all this money to Cornelius for next year as well, if I'm not mistaken. And I've been working from this premise that I don't know that I think Chris Jones is a great general manager. He's obviously able to coach guys up and get his guys and guys fall in love with him for whatever reasons are of what he is behind the scenes. But I just look at moves that he made when he was the GM in Sask and the head coach. I never got the impression that he cared much about his offense. Like, he had Zach Collaros, and I never got the impression he cared too much about his offense. And I thought that might be changing when they go and get Geno Lewis and Stephen Dunbar and Kyron Moore to add to Manny Arsenault and their Canadian talent. But then they'll have done weird things that I don't understand, like Dylan Mitchell popped last season. Well, Dylan Mitchell's already been re-signed. Dylan Mitchell was on the first year of a rookie contract, already re-signed. You're not taking the 2+1 that you have with him. you can get him on a minimum salary for a time and you decide to re-sign him already. Kevin Brown didn't start till late this season. He's already been re-signed. And I don't understand if they were afraid those guys were going to leave for the USFL or the XFL, which would be their only concerns, because the NFL is always an option for everybody at the end of the season. So I'm back to, I don't know if I think Chris Jones is great at this whole GM thing, and maybe someone else should take that over, because there's just a lot of decisions that maybe it's my own ignorance I just don't get.
Well, I think it was, I can't remember if it was Hodge. Someone was on here talking that was why Cornelius got that big contract when he did. Is I guess there were calls from the XFL or whatever, which, because obviously he was with the Vipers. But I'm like, because last year when they signed Cornelius and then he came out and threw, it was like the end zone interception there that the Elks lost to get at home, like the week that he signed the contract. So you're like, can we get that money back? It seems weird, to focus so much money around Cornelius and not really have a quarterback there that could do. But that was kind of what they did last year. It was like, I don't know. It feels like sometimes in the CFL, like, well, we can pay a lot for this receiver that'll elevate the quarterback, and I don't know if that really is how it works out.
Well, they had so many weapons, right? When we were contemplating, well, how does it look as we're forecasting the season, say in March or April? You look at this Elks receiving core. It contends with the Bombers for what's the best one. Like Geno Lewis is a stud. Stephen Dunbar, you have to move his position, but he's a stud, right there. Dylan Mitchell absolutely popped last year, and he was in a lot of guys' top 50 lists as we voted for the CFL top 50. And Kyron Moore is a guy who can be a weapon in multiple ways. Manny Arsenault is that reliable veteran. There's so much love for Gavin Cobb from the University of Manitoba, who was injured last season. They're not without Canadian talent in Forbes Montbleau and Danny Vandervoort, who had a couple of touchdowns in a game I called and caught me totally off guard. They are not without talent in this receiving core, and they've got Canadian offensive linemen that teams would like. Would probably like Mark Cordy. Maybe not the price they pay him, but they would like Mark Cordy to be one of their interior offensive linemen. It's just, everything they've done makes sense for if you believe Cornelius can be great, right? Everything absolutely makes sense. If you're working for the basis that Cornelius can be a great quarterback, signing him to that deal makes great sense, because pretend he was top level, you'd be saving 150, 200 grand over what a top level quarterback should get paid. I just don't get it, because I've never thought, I'm at the point where I don't think Cornelius is salvageable in the Canadian Football League because of the problems that I've discussed in a bunch of places. I see all the things that his proponents see, but I don't see the thing I need to see, which is the consistent ability to hit receivers who are even fractionally open in the right spot to get them touchdowns. Geno Lewis, week 1, open in the end zone, if it just put a foot in front of him, but it's a foot behind him into the defender, and then they don't get run second and down, and they have to kick a field goal, and you just can't leave that on the table at this level.
In terms of quarterbacks, Vernon here, my boy in BC, and I thought the first week he felt good. They said he played good here last week. I wasn't as impressed, right? 22-0 wasn't a miraculous score. I think that Vernon was very happy to get that one touchdown. I saw him kind of thanking God for that. But obviously Winnipeg defense and all that's going to be a tough struggle this week. But overall, how has he done this year? Kind of now that it's his house, it's his team.
I think he's been okay. To your point, 22-0, like that's 5 field goals, right? 5 field goals. I feel like every time the offense comes off the field and the field goal team comes on, they're like, this is a loss. We should be getting 7, but we're having to settle for 3. That's just me putting words in their mouths. They want to be scoring touchdowns, right? And in games against better opponents, you're going to have to score touchdowns. I was thinking about the matchup they had with the Bombers. The Bombers are putting up 40 a game. That's going to be roughly 14 field goals you'll need to get to 40 and beat them 42-41, right? Like it's so hard to get there with field goals. So you've got to be able to put it in the end zone. Their week 1 opponent was Calgary. Calgary did not look anything like Calgary that we've been used to for 15 years, 10 years, whatever it is. So it was fine. The game against Edmonton was okay. The numbers are 300 yards. I get it. I'm not overwhelmed with Vernon so far. The funny thing, tell me if this strikes you as funny. People are talking about Vernon's going to break out. I have this feeling like Vernon is always the breakout guy. And then I think, He's 30, and I saw him play in the old Taylor Field in Saskatchewan, which was 2014. Like, he's been around a long time. He is what he is, and it's certainly workable. But to think he's going to take a Josh Allen year 2 to year 3 leap from the Buffalo Bills, the he's 30. He's been around a long time. When you've thrown more than 1,000 passes, we get it. We kind of should understand what you are.
Well, and my problem is, even if BC sits at 2 all season here in the West, you're still going back to Winnipeg here and getting your ass kicked like you did last year. I mean, it's like we kind of know what this is.
Anything can happen. I mean, I kind of hate anything can happen, but the Bombers' first week game, they gave up 3 touchdowns on a blocked punt, essentially a Kallar's fumble that ends up in the end zone, and a fumble on a return that essentially ends up in the end zone, though it took 1 extra offensive play. If you get to that game, you're in a good spot. And I mean, Winnipeg's offense is flying. Winnipeg's defense is not, in my mind, flying. And it was a spot we looked at in the offseason and went, every year another team just chips away a piece of this Winnipeg defense, right? Steven Richardson went to BC after 21, and Casey Sales got very nice money to go to Hamilton in 22. And okay, well, those are 2 big presences in that defensive interior. And okay, well, now they're going to run out a young defensive backfield. The back 6 is quite young, though it has some very strong spots. It's quite young. And the salary cap nature of the sport, you're paying all this money for Collaros and Kenny Lawler and these guys. It takes if you're going to pay big money in some spots, you have to go, thinner in some other spots. And I think we're at the point where the Winnipeg defense of 2021, that's not your 2023 defense by any stretch. Those guys were world beaters, and now they're going to have to outscore. Like, the offense is going to have to outscore some performances by their defense, in my mind.
In terms of, I'm kind of looking here at the schedule. In terms of the other teams, Hamilton right now, it seems to be kind of in a free fall ride, and Bo, and we didn't look good. And I had said I think Bo's maybe past his prime, and I didn't live through all the Bo. Everything I've known about the CFL is like he's competing with Jake Mayer, and then Jake Mayer takes over. But how big of a deal is it? Bo's out, Matthew Shields is playing, and then just in general they didn't look good with Bo. Yeah.
They weren't, in some spots, they weren't too far from looking good in the game against Winnipeg in week number 1. They had receivers, Chris Godwin or Godwin and Tim White running in behind Winnipeg defensive backs, and Bo would just miss them. And you go, that's close. And then if you're on Hamilton's side, you go, why can't you? It would have been so, right? It's one of those things that happens. I think I'm perhaps most excited for Hamilton because in what we've seen of Matthew Schultz, the guy who will take over this week, he's exciting and he has some promise, right? I think I've personally been foiled by guys who have kind of a Matthew Schultz skill set in past years. But Schultz to me throws the ball better than anybody I can kind of think of. He's the scrambler. He was the second quarterback in some plays last season, and they'd throw him a swing pass and he'd try to get upfield, stuff like that. But I think he's a better passer than some of the guys that I can think of, running quarterbacks from America who would come up here. So I'm really excited to see how it works with Schultz, and then how it works with Schultz once defensive coordinators get a look at him and what Hamilton does with him. Because it's a different skill set than Bo does. So it'll take Tommy Condell, he'll have to change some stuff up, but I'm honestly holding out a lot of hope for Matthew Schultz because I think there's something there, and it could be harnessed. So this could be, for as long as Bo's out, this could be a positive move for the Hamilton Tiger Cats.
Well, that's the thing is, what if Matthew Schultz comes in and just lights the world on fire, and then you're like, what do we? I mean, I was looking when they said the 3 down had the injury report, like, Bo's getting a ton of money. I mean, it's just crazy to think like you have all this tied up in him and to still not be performing well coming in, how it's been the first couple weeks.
Yeah, I think of him as the perennial bounce back guy, or we'll give him credit for bounce back, because Bo hasn't been Bo since 2018. So 19, I think the broken leg was in 19, shoulder, 21, 22. I went into this season thinking, Hamilton's going to be pretty good because there's a chance that Bo gets back to it. And then whatever's going on, if it's the shoulder, if it's something else, it hasn't been there through 2 games so far, and it's going to be a while now with the injury. So yeah, but I just feel like when guys who have hit those heights, right, MOP level, Grey Cup MVP level, I always feel like, okay, they can get back there, barring something having changed dramatically. When Collaros was at his lowest point, I, in my heart, knew Collaros could be back up again because I'd seen him in 15 be phenomenal. So I always believed in that. And part of me is still stuck with that with Bo, but then you go, there's some injury things that are affecting him. I feel like whether it hurts at the moment, it just looks like it's affecting the way he's able to play.
How impressive was Chad Kelly here with the Argonauts? Sway Kelly is now everyone gets to call him.
I think he was fine. Like that first quarter, I thought was, okay, well, look at this happen. And he scores 3 touchdowns, but 2 were quarterback sneaks, so I kind of don't care about those. The scramble was fantastic, right? Where was it Jaguar Davis? He kind of faked out and gets into the end zone. I went, okay, this looks fine. The numbers look fine from week number 1, and they won at home. So I really want Chad Kelly to be good because we're not overwhelmed with great quarterbacks in the CFL right now. So I would love it if he was 80% of Nathan Rourke. That'd be phenomenal for the CFL. At week 1 was fine. I think I'm going to want to see more go on. And when the receiving core is fully healthy, we'll get a chance to see more. But yeah, to me, it was, I just know what I've seen, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's good. Let's build from there. And Toronto may have something. But I can't be 100% sure.
Is that the easiest money in the world to bet Toronto over Edmonton this weekend?
Edmonton's got to figure something out, right? Yeah, it's got to be. What the line must be like 7 or 7.5. It's maybe pushing out. Edmonton's got to find some points because someone's getting fired, losing their job, and if they don't start writing this thing right, they're back at home where they haven't won since 1856. I think is the actual. I don't know. It's been a while, but I really would like Edmonton to be good because the league's more fun if Chris Jones led teams are good and if Geno Lewis is clowning defensive backs and if there'd be a lot of swag in that defense if they were up 15 late in the game and Luchez Purifoy got a pass knocked down. There'd be a lot of swag in that, and to me that makes the game a lot more fun.
Last couple of questions here. We'll get you out of here. I appreciate your time. Ottawa, got the bye week, and Mazzoli, I guess when he comes back, they've looked terrible with. I mean, I don't know if Mazzoli comes in there and kind of rebounds that. What have you made of Ottawa here?
I'm surprised that it has gone this way through 2 games, and Mazzoli cures a lot of problems when they come back. Here's your defined number 1 quarterback, and let's go. We can do some stuff. I think in the current ecosystem or the current grouping of Canadian quarterbacks, I end up ranking Mazzoli quite high, but then to me, he's a guy with a high ceiling and a low floor because he can take the 21 Grey Cup, come into that game in relief when Dane Evans gets hurt, and take Winnipeg to overtime. The last drive to force overtime into the win in that game, incredible. Like Mazzoli was awesome in that game, and he'd been pulled in the East Final the game before. You go, okay, so high ceiling and low floor as well. But I had preseason wagers that he was going to lead the league in passing. Like I think he's in that offense is going to fire up some numbers when it gets going. I'm surprised because I remember Nick Arbuckle's first start was a game Calgary against Sask in my first year there, and Arbuckle looked fantastic. So for him to transition from that, it's been a long road from 19 to 2023 with a lot of stops along the way. It just hasn't come for him the way, honestly, I thought it would. That if they want to go to Tyree Adams, I get it. Like I totally understand. But yeah, you have to believe that Mazzoli can cure a lot of what ails them, but they're not without problems in other spots as well.
Yeah, Arbuckle, he's kind of duty at this point. I mean, he's just not. I feel bad, and he really is trying to play his heart out there, trying to make moves, but it's just not working out like that. Because the last team I want to hit on Calgary, their win here, not an impressive game. The Calgary Ottawa Thursday night fest was it last weekend or last week? So Calgary with Mayer and all that, like are they rebounding here? What do you make of them?
There's quarterbacks I'm in on and I'll be in on forever. There's quarterbacks we've talked about I'm out on and I'll be out on forever. Jake Mayer's, I don't know, it's kind of Jake Mayer in that offense. I'm kind of sliding toward out on because I find Calgary really, at least it's painful to watch. Like, okay, a 5-yard stick route. Let's bubble screen it out to this side. Stick route, hitch screen. Oh, somebody throw the ball down the field to Malik Henry. Someone fire some balls down there. Traylon Dukes looks like he's tall. Hammer something downfield. Get some deep crossers. Give me something to grab onto instead of, okay, over here. It's like watching in just a chess match, but not that entertaining Queen's Gambit type chess, but like an actual chess match where it's 30 minutes between moves and Spassky, just go. I find it really rough to watch. It's the shortest passing offense in the CFL. And it just, I don't know. And this is part of what I don't know is Bo loved to move the ball down the field in Calgary. And Jake when he first came in we kind of felt like he was this gunslinger. Right? Oh, he got picked off. He doesn't care. He's hammering it downfield, deep middle again. Let's go. Gunslinger. And this is just the opposite of gunslinger. This is Trevor Harris on, like 4 downers before the game, right? We're controlled and we're getting it out super slow. So I don't know how that's all going to play out. And I don't know if they do that because they believe it's the best way to go or they believe that's what Jake Mayer can offer them. So I'm on the continuum. I'm leaning towards out on Mayer, but he is still accurate with a high completion percentage, which is about to expected. So yeah, I don't know. And Calgary's offseason was weird in that 20-something players got away, like not 30-year-olds, but 20-somethings who were super valuable got away in free agency. So what's happening behind that? I have a lot of questions about Calgary. And they, 1-1, and they were not super impressive to me in either game. So I'm waiting to see, week 3 and maybe through week 6, we'll have a better idea. At least I will.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, BC here and 2-0, but Stamps didn't look good week 1, and then Elks we've talked about ad nauseum. So we'll see. But yeah, I like Mayer. I don't know if it's like too much pressure now, and the safety blanket's gone with Bo, and it's kind of all your thing. He seemed was it Farhan? Was he interviewing them on the sidelines at like halftime? He was very rude to Farhan. He's like, "Well, we got to figure this out." I'm like, don't be rude to Farhan there. So. Derek, I appreciate it. I wish you bad luck when the Blue Bombers tomorrow against the BC Lions. But otherwise, I really appreciate it in your busy schedule and everything. So it means a lot you taking the time to come on.
No, I appreciate you having me. I love talking about the CFL, so I appreciate that you do too.
Awesome. Thanks again. Huge special thanks to all of our guests for coming on this week. Like I said, Derek Taylor, voice of the Blue Bombers, taking time out, busy week, getting ready to call that game. Really appreciate him making the time in his schedule. Pat Rifino coming on earlier in the week to accommodate my work schedule. Certainly appreciate all the work that Pat has done all season with his USFL recaps and doing our show, and doing the stuff for Mark over at the Hub and everything else, and then putting together the All-USFL list. I thought that was really cool that Pat felt inspired to do that, and I think that's great to kind of give a spotlight to a lot of these players that maybe wouldn't get the recognition otherwise. And then huge special thanks to Ric Serritella coming on. Big football news with Rick with the IFA and everything going on with that. I told Rick offline, I am a welcome vessel for anything that Rick wants to talk about in that way. I appreciate him being a friend of the show and the connections and knowledge that he has. So good luck to Rick and everyone over with the International Football Alliance. Should be exciting. That will do it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Like and subscribe. Like I said, get us up to 3,500 subscribers. And I hope you guys all have a good and safe weekend. Take care.